how do I put this? It's a conversation that I think is important to have, and the only reason I'm really talking about this is I've seen this pop up on Reddit a lot. I've also seen this pop up on Twitter or X a lot. And I think there's some unique conversations that need to be had in this scenario. And that is the question, why is Dalaran's destruction okay, but Teldrassil's wasn't? Now, to give you guys just a little bit of insight into the question and why this has caused such a stir online, they're not referring to can or can you not destroy capital cities. They're referring to how players have reacted. So there was a very strong reaction when Teldrassil was destroyed all the way back in Legion. Players were super annoyed and super angry. Some players weren't. Myself, I kind of liked it. I thought it was sort of like a big moment where the Horde sort of cements this war between the Horde and the Alliance. Of course, Blizzard decided to go a completely different direction with that. But then with the Dalaran destruction thing, most players didn't seem to care all that much. Now, to put stuff into... Let's go sort of step by step. I think that's the best way to answer this. The Dalaran destruction and the Teldrassil destruction, in my opinion, are not something that you can really compare to one another. Mainly because of who destroyed it. Teldrassil was destroyed, at least at the time, by the Horde. Now, in a game where players can choose a side, so you have one group of your player base that chooses Alliance and the other group chooses Horde, losing becomes a very tenuous and also very risky sort of, I guess you could say, experiment. If one side loses too badly, it starts to feel really bad to play on that side. And then if there isn't a proportional clapback, so to speak, then you just lose. And players don't like losing, especially in World of Warcraft, where we've been trained sort of over the years to just always win. Why would we now be okay with just suddenly losing? And I think we can all agree, especially in World of Warcraft, the loss of Teldrassil was never actually answered, I think, to the satisfaction of the Alliance players. The Alliance didn't get to completely decimate and destroy a Horde city. You could point out that, yes, okay, Undercity, but Undercity was already a bit of a hellhole. And again, did they really destroy it? Because it was more Sylvanas that destroyed it on their behalf. So again, it didn't really feel like the players were getting their revenge. There was no vengeance there. Sylvanas destroyed it and made it so that they couldn't move back in. So that's sort of the first thing. Who destroyed it? With Dalaran, it's a completely different story. You have Xal'atath, who is an enemy to everyone, except, of course, some of us who are very loyal to Xal'atath and would follow her right into the fire. But most people accept that Xal'atath is, quote-unquote, enemy at the moment. So when an enemy does it, it's a shared loss. So one side of the player base don't end up feeling like they were just kicked in the balls by the other side of the player base. The Horde cannot stand and cheer as Dalaran is destroyed because the Horde had nothing to do with that destruction, in the same way that the Alliance cannot claim this as their kill. So both sides are aggrieved equally. The other thing, of course, is Dalaran was never a capital city to anyone. Yes, it was a capital city insofar as during certain expansions, Dalaran would be our home. But I think I speak for most players when I say at the end of Legion, most players had sort of had enough of Dalaran being a capital hub. You know, Dalaran as a city, lore-wise, really interesting. As an actual city, it has things. It's fine, I guess. But it's not iconic. It's not like Teldrassil. It's not like Stormwind. It's not like Orgrimmar, you know. There's no real history there that people are attached to. So destroying Dalaran is never going to elicit that same response. Now, there is a downside to that, and that is how focused are you getting the player base after the destruction of Dalaran? And I would argue just the right amount. Now, you could make an argument, well, if Xal'atath destroyed Stormwind, that would have been far bigger, and the sort of drive to make Xal'atath pay would have been much greater. But I would say Dalaran serves the perfect target, because destroying Dalaran doesn't leave players feeling like they just lost. But it does make players feel like we're coming for you, bitch. Right? So you get the reaction from the players, we want to stop this enemy, but we don't end up feeling like, well, that's just another thing we've lost. How much more do we have to lose before we finally get to claim our own back? And Dionysus, if you listen to what I said, you would understand I'm not referring to things being iconic or not being iconic. What I'm referring to is the level of of the icon. Dalaran is a cool city, don't get me wrong, and definitely in the heart of players, Dalaran will always have a special place, but it is not Stormwind, it is not Orgrimmar, and to try and make the claim that it is would be disingenuous. Just like 100%. No one is, no one is choosing Dalaran as their favorite city in the whole world. Lore-wise, sure, a lot of people might, because there's some cool lore behind Dalaran. But when people think about World of Warcraft and their favorite cities, it's not going to be Dalaran that ranks there. It's going to be Orgrimmar, or maybe it's going to be Thunderbluff, or maybe it's going to be Ironforge, or maybe for some people it might be the Undercity, or it might be Stormwind. But it's not going to be Dalaran. Not only that, but I feel like from a story perspective, Dalaran just made the most sense. Almost no other place would have made that much sense. And I wonder if we're not missing a lot by not making a connection between Teldrassil and Dalaran. Because I can't help but feel like there must be a connection there. Why did Xal'atath believe that Dalaran must be destroyed? And then why did Sylvanas believe that Teldrassil must be destroyed? Now, Teldrassil is a world tree. The world trees are tapped into the ley lines, the nascent energy of Azeroth. Dalaran very much is like a focused iris. It's like a focusing iris for specifically that, the natural energies, the latent energies of Azeroth. So Dalaran is like supercharged with power because a lot of the power culminates there. If you remember back to the story of Malygos, the reason Malygos tied all of the ley lines to the Nexus was he didn't trust human mages with access to the ley lines. But then, of course, when Malygos was defeated, places like Dalaran could absolutely start tapping into these ley lines and utilizing the power within these ley lines for their own purposes. So I wonder if there's a connection between Teldrassil or the world trees in general and Dalaran's destruction, specifically since we have the Haranir now in the War Within, and they seemingly came from nowhere, and their only role and job is to defend what is the roots of a very ancient world tree that we, of course, know nothing about. Like, we don't know which world tree it may have been. There's some speculation here and there, but fundamentally, it's still sort of up in the air. I wonder how much more will be revealed, especially if you go through some of the interviews, and we will go through some of the interviews here. But when you start to go through the interviews, you see Blizzard. Blizzard seems to be very, I guess you could say, animated about this expansion and the exploration of the lore. They're very cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of lore that builds into this expansion, but they're desperately trying to build on top of that lore. And I understand why, because in every single interview that I've now read through in the last few weeks, they all seem to come back to the same thing. This expansion is the foundation on which the next decade or two of World of Warcraft is going to be built. Talking about the housing system, for example, coming in Midnight, the housing system is built to be an evergreen system for the next 20 plus years. This expansion is built in such a way that on top of it, more and more stories can be told. So I think we're gonna definitely see the ley lines play itself out. There's another question that I got during the week in the comment section on one of my videos, where someone asked, why is no one coming to help? You know, where are the Naru? Where are the old gods, or the wild gods rather? Where are the Titan Keepers, or the dragon aspects? Why are none of these beings coming to our aid? Now, the short answer, and I do want to make a video about this, the problem is just I don't know where to start. For example, the Naru, my answer is I don't know where the Naru is. One would think that this is like the perfect time for the Naru to show up and start throwing, you know, their crystals around or whatever, but they're nowhere to be found. The wild gods, again, one of these things where you just go, perfect. Now, for the wild gods, I would just put a slight sort of kink in the cable there and say it all depends on who controls the wild gods. I think for a long time, people have just sort of assumed that the wild gods are natural to Azeroth and no one controls them. But I have a feeling that the wild gods were created by Elune. I think it explains why the wild gods all go to Ardenweald, and that is where they are reborn should they die. That's also where they are created. We go back and we look at the story of Vol'jin. Vol'jin is currently being prepared to become another one of the wild gods, but he is in Ardenweald as this is happening. So I think Elune may actually be the creator of the wild gods, which means the wild gods serve Elune, which means for some reason or the other, Elune currently has zero interest in helping out. So even though Azeroth is in danger, Elune is going, nah, I don't think I'll come. The only reason I can think that might actually be happening, and that might be or what the reason might be, is Elune is very much aware of what the Manifold and the engines of the Titans were doing to Azeroth. Elune knows that it was never just about keeping Azeroth safe. It was about corrupting Azeroth. And she wants Xal'atath to destroy this. Because once Azeroth is destroyed, Azeroth is free to empower Elune. And Elune can then use her wild gods. I actually think, by the way, this is literally fanfic at this point because we have very little evidence of this. But I think the reason the wild gods exist is Azeroth spoke to Elune, and Azeroth gave Elune the sacred charge to build an army. The Thragar was created by Azeroth herself as one of her armies, right? And I think it patches into that. So Azeroth is building an army. We, for example, I believe, are soldiers in the army of Azeroth. And at some point, we're going to find out who we're fighting. I don't know exactly who we're fighting, but we are going to be fighting someone. So that's sort of where the Wild Gods is at the moment. The next one, for me, the Titan Keepers. I would be willing to bet that the reason Titan Keepers have not come to our aid is because they're incapable of. Remember, the Titan Keepers were built with incredibly restrictive code. There are some things that they're just not allowed to do. And no matter what they do, no matter what they try, they cannot break that code. And it is clear that this particular landmass was not a place where all of the Titan Keepers could come. It was very controlled. And so I would almost argue that that's why the Titan Keepers don't show up, because, well, it doesn't even occur to them. They're not meant to be there. For the dragon aspects, I think this is kind of easy. The dragon aspects are currently rebuilding. Like, even if they wanted to come help us, they would be in no shape to do so. They've just gone through massive internal wars. They've just been able to sort of regain their powers, and they're rebuilding themselves. So there's no real way that they would be an asset, at least at the moment. But I do think we might see all of these forces show up towards midnight as this thing, because you have to understand, from a lore perspective, we're still in the early days. You know, the war hasn't really kicked off yet. We don't really know what Xal'atath is doing. You know, Xal'atath at this point is just sort of chilling out. If you know, like at most, she's basically just chilling out a bit. So I would almost bet that once we recognize the threat that Xal'atath poses, that's when these other forces may actually be called upon and may actually come to help. But do not expect help from the Naru, because I think the Naru, when they finally do arrive, they're not going to come as friends. At least they might arrive as friends, but they'll very quickly turn into enemies. But that is my answer to why is no one coming to help. That is my answer to why is Dalaran's destruction okay, but Teldrassil's wasn't. I hope that provides a decent answer at least.